organization. It's a move. It's a movement. We're talking about unity. We're talking about unity. So we're aimed to taking down the system of race by educating, enlightening, informing, and positively debating with those who have counterviews.
Richard, your friendly host. Welcome to the show.
Hey, and I'm Carlin. I want to welcome you also to talk about unity. It's great to be here today. Man, look at that outstanding background. We got the greatest crew here. Vince made this outstanding background. E.R.A.S.E. We're making it happen today. So we want to welcome y'all to the show.
Man, we got a great show lined up today. I'm telling you, we are going to talk about some stuff. My wife tells me this, Carlin. If you can talk about everything, you can get through anything.
Yeah.
There's those can't go there places, and that really messes you up. But you've learned this in family. You've learned this in relationship.
I learned that
we enjoyed some of this back and forth. But if you could talk about everything, you can get through anything. And I enjoy the passionate discussions family has. Right?
Yeah, and we had a passionate one a couple of weeks ago. My brother was in the studio. We're trying to get him back. Everybody wants him back. They said that was our best show because we yelled at each other and everybody was getting used to that fighting thing happening. But so we'll have him back and we're gonna have an adult conversation next time. Okay, so y'all stand by for that.
I'm trying to get it to where it's a show discussion banter / wrestling match.
Yeah, and that's the thing. See, what people don't know, we didn't have Richard here because that's another dynamic. All right, and people say, well, it might be another dynamic just because of skin color. No, but it's the relationship thing that you'll see has nothing to do with color when we start that whole thing going back and forth. And that's the thing. There would be things going all kinds of directions because with him and me, it's just back going this way. Yeah. You in there, things are just bouncing off the wall. Yeah, it's going to be crazy next time.
And Dwayne and I we have a long-standing relationship. I mean, it's not a love-hate. It's a love don't really quite get you relationship.
Well, that's the cool thing though, that at the end of the day, all this stuff is about relationship. I was talking to the crew here, Dakota and Vince. I was telling them that at the end of the day, almost every one of these situations you have, even in our country, when it went from the top to the bottom, whether it's political candidates, whether it's people working in schools, businesses, companies, whatever, there's that relationship factor that makes a difference. And that's why we come on here and we say, we've got to talk about unity, because if you don't articulate that, if you don't talk about that with other people so they understand that at the end of the day, you and I, we've got to make a connection, and we're going to go forward, then you'll end up with kind of what we've got in our country. We've got a lot of people who are disconnected, so disconnected from the others that we don't decide to walk forward together. So we're talking about unity.
Talk it out, walk it out, and if you stay at it long enough, you're going to form a relationship, and then that leads into trust and respect and a fruitful, productive, not only relationship in life, but a society. If we model it for other people that haven't been able to do it, success leaves clues. Yeah. And so the more we do that together, the better it is. Proximity, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show. Proximity is the bedrock for relationship. Yeah. And if we can just get together and just have conversations, you know what we need to do sometime. And we're just thinking, just indulge me for a second. What I would like to do is I want to ask the questions without repercussions that I've always had about the way I see things differently than I do.
Yeah, we really do.
And you can, I'm not going to finish. You can ask me any question about my culture, my history, and just back and forth. Because you know what? We might be surprised at the answers. I have no idea why that's that way. So anyway, I'd love to do it.
Well, but the thing is, what that does is it opens up dialogue. I mean, it allows you to have conversations. Right. You know, on the show before where they have Tennille's touchy subjects, they're talking about and there's really so much of what we say is a touchy subject, and so we don't bring it up. There are things that you would never bring up in a community of us because we're different than you, and so you wouldn't bring it up. Right. But we need to be able to talk about that. And that's why on Talk About Unity, we try to say, hey, we got to get to the point where we can actually dialogue. So in our show today, the basics of our show today is called Race, what it is and why it is. Because I don't think a lot of people really understand how we got here. And they don't understand why we got here. And so we're going to talk about that, explore that, so that we can all come with a better foundation, so that we can have these discussions. All right, but before we get to that and get to our really show content, we want to talk about some of the current issues that are happening out there. Richard, we you know, all the stuff that's happening in our country. What's going on?
There's some stuff that is just popping this morning, and of course, you know, and my wife throws me things. Oh, did you hear about this today? And then what's the saying? Consider the source. So there's some new social media platforms. There's some old historical social media platforms, but some stuff came across a few social media platforms this morning about, and this came from Kayleigh McEnany, which you know is President Trump's spokesperson, press secretary, and said that Texas, which is
our state,
filed charges in federal court against Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and the other, was it 3 or 4 other states that are having election irregularities?
And Georgia one of them?
Yes. So election irregularities, and so this gives them legal standing, so they say. But okay, so the basic premise is, okay, Texas went for President Trump, and these other states, if counting everything the way it is right now, if nothing changes, so these states are going to go towards President-elect Biden, and that means Texas, who they voted for, is going to not win, so they feel disenfranchised because of these other states' irregularities, and so now it gives them a direct path to the Supreme Court if they aren't granted a voice in these states, or any actions taken in these states. So it's a slippery slope. And so if you studied United States history, we know that Texas, here's the slippery slope. Texas is the only state before they came into the Union that had the agreements that if they wanted to, voted for, to succeed from the Union with, I guess there would still be repercussions, but to succeed from the United States, which means Texas leaves the United States. It's actually in the Texas Constitution and the agreement with the United States to succeed from the Union. A lot of people have said that forever. Texas, needs to be its own country, right? But this could really muddy the waters for quite some time. I think it's a scary time.
And now I'm going to invoke my my wife's legal knowledge as an attorney.
Sure.
So the question is it'll be on standing. That's the term that's used to determine whether or not Texas is legitimate and they have a voice in this actual in the complaint that they're filing. And so it's hard to believe that they would give them standing because of your sovereignty as Texas, and you are responsible only for Texas. And they're saying your feelings or your decisions are not changed by the fact that these other states did something, whether it's improper or not, whatever. So I don't know, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out when it gets to that level. But I would think standing would be the issue, and that they would find out that Texas doesn't have standing. It sounds crazy, but I don't know. So, but on the other side of that, what is your general thought about the election that never ends? I mean, what do you think? What do you think, objectively speaking? Where do you think we're going to go, and what do you think we should go?
Okay, so number one, I think the whole world is looking at the United States and they like, look at these crazy kids fight. I guess they're never going to stop. Okay, so what I think needs to happen is there needs to be some standardization of our election process across all 50 states. And of course, here's states' rights.
What do you mean when you say standardization of it?
Okay, so what I would like is that, and that's process engineering, right? So,
right.
So what I think needs to happen is there needs to be one type of system in which people vote. Here's what I think: vote in person only, unless you can't be there. And of course, we know absentee ballots have worked in the past because there's IDs and things like that. So vote in person only, with very few exceptions, with a valid ID. And I think everybody needs a free, and I'll gladly pay a little extra in taxes for this, voter ID card that is encrypted. So when you vote, it kicks you out, you can't vote again. If you die, you can't vote. No more dead people vote. If you move, then the system knows, and it goes to your encrypted ID card, that if you move, you can't vote in your own district anymore. So you can only vote once, and once you vote, you're kicked out, and if you die, you're kicked out of the system. Which really just, if there is, I mean, some people saying there is no voter fraud. There is none of that going on. And then there's people saying, yes, there is. You know what it does? It just solves, it solves the whole issue. And we would know at the end of the day. I mean, if they can get American Idol,
well, that's the point. Why do you think we don't have that? I mean, we're technology leaders. Why don't we have that? How can we not have this?
Yeah.
This seems like a simple thing in comparison to what Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had created, and you know.
I just don't want anyone disenfranchised regarding their vote. Everybody's vote. This is one of the most important rights of every United States citizen, and I just really want everybody's vote to count. No more, no less. It's all the same. And with all of these, hopefully they're not made up, but it could be people making up videos or stuff, and then all of a sudden, because really it's the elements. Ashland's political science professor said that this is the elements that create civil war, or at least severe civil unrest. When you feel like your vote was stolen, then all of a sudden we have a mess. So we need to fix that.
Yeah. So, all right. So good on that. All right. Let's talk pandemic. What's going on with the pandemic? What's happening across the country? I just noticed California is going on lockdown once again. I also saw where many of the restaurant owners and some of the people in California are standing up and saying, "I'm not closing." And so you're getting, and you talk about the elements of civil war, because these restaurant owners are very upset, and they're saying, "No, I'm not going to comply anymore." They talked about how they shut down previously when Governor Newsom in California told them to shut down for 2 months, and they said no. And and I heard one of the interviewers asking and said, "Well, what if they pass a stimulus?" And there was one owner of the restaurant said, "I don't want them giving me money. I want to earn my own way."
Right.
I was like, "No, that's pretty cool.
Right.
That's pretty cool." But what do you think about that whole thing? I mean, the lockdowns. What do you think we're going to happen in Texas? No lockdown?
Well, our governor said no more lockdowns.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Well, actually, if you look at the data, Texas is doing pretty good. There are some states that have some severe problems, and the problem is, like in New York, he said if the number goes to 5%, then restaurants are going to be shut down. Well, a lot of the medical community has recently come out and said, if you really want to look at where people are, because they do contact tracing, and they kind of go and investigate how did this happen, and what was the travel history around your family getting infested with corona, they found out that the highest percentage of where people get infected is in their home. So how do you control that? I mean, everybody gets, an ankle bracelet that has to stay in the room. I don't know. That's silly, right? Yeah. But restaurants is really a small limit. You compare restaurants, which was between 3 and 5%, compared to malls, which is 9%. So it makes more sense to lock down a mall than it does a restaurant. But there's a lot of hypocrisy in the whole restaurant lockdown. In California, the governor shuts down this lady's restaurant, and she spent all this capital building outdoor dining, and then 50 feet away, the governor says, "You can't shut down, please shut her down." And then 50 feet away, they opened up a movie set catering restaurant, and they're feeding them all in close proximity, not even socially distanced. But they opened that up to them, but wouldn't let her, and she lost her mind. It's gone viral on the internet. So
I saw, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah,
I saw him going off. I saw him going off on about some of the contradictions, and so there are tons of contradictions on this whole thing. So that's going to be. And so, so before we go to break, let's talk about vaccines. What do you think about vaccines? You gonna take it? Is it going to work?
Hey,
what do you think?
The good news is I got corona. And I got my antibodies. I got my antibodies. I got my negative. And so
I still tell him, don't breathe on me. Don't breathe on me.
Oh, my daughter just got it.
Oh, really? That?
They all got it except Amy, and she's like living in the tower of the castle. Right? She's not doing anything with anybody.
Oh, all right.
So.
Hey, well, cool. So y'all think about that. Hey, we're gonna take a break here. When we come back, remember the topic of our show today is what it is, race, and why it is race. So we're little education, Go get your Google out, go get your dictionary, go get your knowledge.
So take some notes.
We're gonna get, and if nothing
good.
else, just listen, because we got a lot of information we're gonna drop on you today, right after this break on Talk About Unity.
That's good.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero, ignition, liftoff.
Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk,
And I bring the unity,
and together we talk about unity. Unity is what matters.
Come
And
on.
right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad. Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk About Unity because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters. Hey, we want to welcome you back to Talk About Unity. And as you see, our subject matter today is all about race, what it is and why it is. I think there's a lot of ignorance that happens out there on what race really is about. And I think we're born into this thing, but then we never ask any questions about it. So all your questions will be answered today as we define what race is and why race is. And so let's get right into it because this is going to be one of those shows where we're going to have to need time for you to digest the information. So let's get in and begin to talk about it. All right, this thing called race.
Yeah. Okay. So race is a classification of people that is not based on any real or accurate biological or scientific truth, but instead on physical characteristics, specifically skin color.
All right, so let's talk about that. All right, so the fact that when we talk about race not being biological or scientific means there's nothing that differentiates me from Richard other than the fact that what you see externally, our physical characteristic, skin color, you would say we're different. Now, in our history, many people have said that, well, no, there's a thing, black people are different than white people. And there have been people, and we'll cover this in some of our discussion today, we'll talk about how we got to that point, but some people actually believe that there are these scientifically physiological differences in us, and they talked about, black people are closer to the apes or things like that, and so they're saying there's something in our human makeup that differentiates us, but the science, and I tell you what, this is the most amazing thing. They had this thing called the Human Genome Project in 2003, just amazing. Blew all that stuff out of the water. Things that people who had been saying this stuff in the 18th and 19th century, I'm talking about the good guys who had been saying, no, there's only one race, the human race. Right. Some people who had been saying that got it verified. While at the same time, you had people in the 18th and 19th century on the other side of that. So So let's continue on and let's go with the second point.
Okay, so race is a social political construction. A social political construction is something created by people. This is not a natural development, is constructed or created for a social and political purpose.
Yeah, and that's what we've done with race.
Yeah.
So those who are proponents of race and support race, have to understand that it is, in fact, something that we, human beings, we made up. Now, that being said, everything that humans beings made up, and this is what people who defend race would say, is like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not good or it's not real. That's true. That's true. However, we got the other side of that argument, and we're going to show you some stuff and show you why it is a bad thing. So, yeah, you're right. It's a social construction. It was made up. It's kind of like stop signs. Stop signs are construction. You know, they have a purpose, all right? And they're not the same in all countries. They have different methods of stop, yield, or whatever. So we would say that that has a very practical benefit, and it's good. We would call that a very good construction, social construct. All right. However, race is got a lot of downsides, and we'll talk about that later. So understand that it is something, in fact, that we made up. You won't find race in the Bible. You won't find that anywhere else. You won't find it in anything solid. It's something that we made up. And here's the thing you really need to know, and you'll see this when we cover the history, is that it is really very recent in history. When you talk about terms of history being the world being thousands of years old, we're talking about in the last 200, 300 years did this race concept come up. Okay, so let's go on.
So the concept of race was created as a classification of human beings with the purpose of giving power to white people and to legitimize the dominance of white people over non-white people.
Now, when we talk about race this way, you're actually, when you use those terms, of course, white people, non-white people, black people, then you've got to understand, first of all, that you've already subscribed to the concept. And so when we got to understand that the fact that we use race and in this sense means you start from the point of, okay, I believe that there's such a thing as black people, white people. So that's the first thing. That's why it's often difficult when I have conversations with people, because I tell them, well, let's start at step one rather than step two, because in step two, it's a given that race exists. All right. And so this statement then basically says that in the race concept, then it was done for this purpose. And this is the killer question when I have people who believe that race is okay. I ask them, all right, if you understood and if you believe this, and right now we're going to prove it to you before the show's over, but right now I'm going to ask you if you believe this. If you believe that race was created for white people to have dominance and subjugate another group of people that were not white, would you still want to keep it? You know, so knowing that, and I'm telling you that is why it was created. So the question is, for those who believe in that, yeah, but now, because I understand people now, I'm black and I'm proud, I understand that. But what I'm saying, if you knew that it was created so that they could do that and subjugate you, that they created and said, we're going to make them non-white and eventually black, make them black, we'll be white, we'll be at the top, would you still do it? And so it'd be interesting to find out what people actually thought about that now.
You know, this is what's happened in the last 300, 400 years, 500 years as a political position and a cultural position of dominance. But you know, if you go back, of course, you know, what I do for a living. I'm a pastor, and I dig down into the Word of God, but into history. Mm-hmm. And you know, this whole dominance of based on race, that was in Egypt. That was all throughout the conquering of lands and tribes and kingdoms, but the one issue that is a reoccurring thing is to dehumanize the ones that they are conquering. And that's some of what we're going to get into as well. Sorry, just wanted to
that's a very good point, because when you think about it, and here's the thing: I've got a friend who lives in France. His name is Miguel Guerra, and he opens up my mind to something much bigger than this concept of race, because he's got it from a world history viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And when we start talking about things that happen to people based on skin color, he brings in stuff that happened in Spain and Portugal and other places around the world, and he puts it in the context of how that is symbolic of kind of same stuff that happened in America, but we only see it in the thing of skin color.
Sure.
And it's so much bigger than that if we can really open our minds. And I keep telling him I'm gonna have him on the show. We're gonna have the Miguel Guerra show because he's just amazing in his knowledge of world history pertaining to these things. So one of the big questions people have is always, well, what's the difference between race and ethnicity? And so let's look at this. And on this slide we've got here, and it kind of identifies and makes it kind of clear. So
sure. So many people like to make ethnic distinctions as well as national distinctions to hold on to their ethnic culture and identity. So there's Italian American, people use that phrase, which is basically ethnicity is Italian and the nationality is U.S. American. And then there's Mexican-American. The ethnicity is Mexican and nationality is United States American. And then there's Chinese American, ethnicity is Chinese and nationality is U.S. American. And of course, African American. And
ethnicity is supposed to be is African.
This ethnicity is supposed to be African, but the nationality
on the screen it says Chinese, but they meant African. All right, so it should be African. But here's the kicker on that thing. Yeah, so that's a mistake. So that's ethnicity is not Chinese for African Americans, by the way. All right, but here's the.
I thought I was going to learn something new.
No, we got that messed up. Too many typos. My editing crew, I have to get on it. All right,
correct.
But here's the thing with this whole thing about ethnicity, race and ethnicity, and people try to use them interchangeably, but you really can't. The Genome Project, which fomented all of the DNA things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, makes this whole thing a whole lot more, not necessarily complex, but actually simplified, because what it does is it identifies that while I've done my DNA, and I'm from Nigeria, West African, Nigeria, but I've also got 16% European, I got 1.2% or something Asian. So all these things are parts of our makeup, and we all mixed up that way, And what's the most amazing thing, I said, if you go far enough back, some of those people who call themselves Ku Klux Klan, whatever, they find that they got some African. They've got some African. It might be a very small percentage, but if you go far enough back, because the original man was found there in Africa, and so this ethnicity thing is in fact true, because it just simply breaks down what are all those mixed parts of our origins. And those origins, of course, stem from people who are located in various places around the globe. And so we're really, at this point, all kind of mixed up in the world, which is really cool, because the more people, and this is what's so cool, with that DNA and all that stuff, go search your DNA. If you really go back and begin to research and find out your family history and begin to trace back, man, it will just take you to so many parts of the world, and you would then realize that, yeah, we're humans. And we're humans.
Well, knowledge is power. It really is. And, the more people become aware of actually who they are through the genome or ancestry, then all of a sudden the light goes off and you say, if this is superior, if this race is superior and this race is inferior, then I have an inner conflict inside of me that I can't resolve. And so you lose those arguments, because you realize you are you, not based on a label. You're you based on, your experiences and what God did, brought you about and put you in the family. He knew what he was doing when he put us where he put us. Anyway, I'm not going to preach today, but the whole concept is, these labels are ridiculous.
And so the question it begs the question, then, if you've got race and ethnicity, then why do you use race? Then why not use ethnicity? And of course, I guess the answer would be because even if you use ethnicity, then people who are quote unquote mixed race, which one do they choose? Especially when you've got a parent who's of this and a different parent who's of that, which one do you say that you are? Now, the crazy stuff that happened, of course, in slavery, the one drop rule and things like that, already said if you got one drop, then you're automatically all over there. So that's crazy. And so that's why even to talk about ethnicity, you got to define these things pretty well. And so there's race versus ethnicity. But let's talk about why race is really such a bad thing. So on the next slide, you'll see that race is really a bad thing. Read that to us there.
Sure. So the concept race is based on socially constructed, but not just socially constructed, but socially, certainly scientifically outmoded beliefs about the inherent superiority and inferiority of groups based on racial distinctions.
Wow. And so think about that. All right. So this is very educational. Think about that. because it's socially constructed, what it's saying is we've now put in place a system where people are inherently superior or inferior. That's the definition. So here's the thing: you can't. It's like if you create a word. I mean, remember when you were young, the word was we made dope a good thing. Stuff is dope. All right. So when dope became dope and became a good thing, if you walked around and just said it's a bad thing, then you were kind of out of whack with the rest of society because everybody understood what this meaning of this word is. It's the same thing when you took the concept of race. When it was created, it carried within it this idea that is forever linked into it that people are inherently superior and inferior. So you could say, well, no, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. We just got to teach people to get along with it. Well, you teaching people to get along with this thing, it's like saying, we want peace between Richard and Carlin, but by the way, here's a knife. By the way, here's a gun. Because embedded in that thing is this thing that makes it such a pernicious and deadly thing. And that is the belief that somebody is up at the top and somebody else is at the bottom. That's why you've got to decide, no, we can't do that because all the good that we want to do, and surely there are a lot of people who say, yeah, but I no longer see people according to their skin color, and I don't adhere to race, but I think it's okay. Yeah, but a lot of other people are, and so that's what's huge, that we're locked in there.
You know, I wish that you and I could do like a traveling show where we go.
We can. Let's travel. Let's go.
So
Right now.
Vince is exactly what it is. The 23andMe testing, right? And so we go and we find people and we bum rush them and we get the results right then, right? And then so they find out, they read their results and they go, I have 3% black. Oh no!
Not 3% black, 3% West African.
Okay, whatever.
3%, not black. Black is race.
Okay, black is race. Okay, so or I'm Ethiopian. Oh no!
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And then some people on the other side are like, oh, I'm 2% Scottish. What am I?
Yes.
Right? And then they have to reconcile the fact that they are what they don't even know they are, and they've based. Now all of a sudden you're going to change. Oh, I'm supposed to act inferior now. Oh, I'm supposed to act superior now because I have this inside me. Is that the most ridiculous thing you ever hear in your life?
Well, yeah, and I think the cool thing about that is, and the traveling show, which is a good idea, which we need to get on the road and we can do that. The cool thing about that is it actually does give people an opportunity and to experience, I think, to change their minds about how they view themselves. I mean, because it's really, at the end of the day, that's what we got to do. People grow up. I mean, I did. I grew up in Prairie View, Texas. Prairie View A&M University, HBCU. Man, I went to all their stuff. And everything there, especially in the 70s, was black. I mean, it was all black. I mean, it was just black. We had black. As a 7-year-old, I got more black history than I ever got in school, whatever, because it was all black. Because it was all black. So I grew up that way. And so my mind, and so when I grew up that way, I mean, I was always trying to explore greater bounds than just those, though. And so while I had, you saw my brother on here, he was into the black, whatever. So what we're going to do as we go forward, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that, and we're going to cover that a little bit more detail when we come back after the break. We're going to talk about this hierarchy thing because we're going to explain that, and y'all going to get your minds blown today, all right, on Talk About Unity.
We work our whole lives to support our families. With one accident or illness, it can all be gone in an instant. Now there's a smart, affordable way to protect your family. Go to findhealthbenefits.com and discover low-cost life insurance for as little as $2 per month. Add to that a tax-deferred annuity that can help you protect your assets and grow your money for retirement. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com. or call 877-235-6094. A critical illness can strike without warning and wipe out your life savings. In fact, it's the #1 reason for bankruptcy. Find Health Benefits offers an affordable solution. Get up to $50,000 if you get cancer, stroke, or a heart attack, giving you the peace of mind to focus on getting better while the plan helps you to pay your bills and medical expenses. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. 66% of seniors spend more time shopping for cable TV than Medicare plans. Most say because it's just too confusing. Laws change every year. The wrong plan could cost you thousands and prevent you from seeing the doctors you want. Introducing FindHealthBenefits.com. Save time, save money, see specialists without referrals. Go to FindHealthBenefits.com or call 877-235-6094 for this informative brochure.
Society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters.
Hey, we want to welcome you back to talk about Unity Today, where we're giving you education on race, what it is, and why it is. And when we left, we were talking about this hierarchy thing that it created. And so race inherently carries this idea that there's somebody at the top, there's somebody at the bottom, and depending on what color your skin is, determines where you fit into that. You know. But even then, but what's crazy about that? Even then, even if you just use that, I made a post on Facebook about how we determine where you fit on that thing based on skin color. But then you take people like India, and I'll talk about India. India's got the caste system. Yep. But some of those people are darker than me, yep. But they're not called black, they're called brown. I'm like, so color is a poor measure for a race concept. So get that out of the way. All right, so let's talk about that for a second. I want to talk about this hierarchy thing. India has this, I'm reading a book right now by Isabel Wilkerson called Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent, and it covers this thing really well, and it puts a new perspective on this thing that we call race, because she says the caste, and she takes it from India. Most people from their public education experience understand the caste of India, and in India they have a caste system, whereas at the top, if you're at the top, you're like close to the gods, you're golden, and if you're at the bottom, you're what they call an untouchable. And so in between there, and there's, we think we got a problem with this race concept. Theirs is so deep because theirs is based on their Hindu religion. And so if someone has assigned you a place and it's based on what God has created for you, you're really fixed in that place. And so, but that's what they've got. They've got a hierarchy, and you can see it there on the screen where they got the Brahmins up top, and down at the bottom you've got, but here's the thing, and this was very enlightening to understand. At the very bottom of their hierarchy, they have the untouchables, and if you look at the diagram on the screen there, they are not even part of the caste system. They're not even in their hierarchy. Oh, wow. They're detached. And that's why it talks about them being out of caste, or as we know the word, outcast. The word that's where we get outcast from, because they don't even rate to be in the system. And so that's really low. And so in America, of course, we got it a little bit different, and we started out based on their skin color. And as we said earlier in the show, we started out with whites and non-whites. And if you look at the historical record, you see that it was the whites, and certain whites were better than other whites. And without making it a long story, something happened in our history, and I would call it Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, where indentured servants linked up with slaves, and together they were going to fight the master. And master was like, uh-oh. And there was a lot learned and a lot changed after that happened in 1676. And so they began this hierarchy that said, hey, all right, well, perhaps those Czechoslovakians and those Irish,
The Irish,
maybe they're not Anglo-Saxons like we are. However, we can use them,
Mhm.
and they created the stratification so that there were these super whites, and there was a little less than whites, and so that created that. And then eventually, as time passed, then some of those people they began to migrate because of the dwindling numbers of Anglo-Saxons. Then they began to migrate, and so then they began to bring in the Polish and the Irish and all those others, and they began to admit them into the whiteness. And so white became a thing, and then it was more binary, white and black. And so and so we've evolved that way. And if you look at the diagram, you'll see that you got all these mixed groups there between, and you got the indigenous Americans, Native Americans, and then at the bottom of the scale today is always going to be blacks. Is always going to be blacks, and that's strange too, because if you look at, I've got a lot of Nigerian friends here, and so they have a different mindset because what they've come from, and when they come to America, they don't understand how, and they don't see themselves. Number one, they don't see themselves at the bottom of the hierarchy, so they can't envision that. And so if you look at the statistics, I guarantee you the Nigerians in America succeed far beyond I would say the African Americans. And that's because I think they come with a different mindset.
The mindset, that's exactly right. They have not been told of all these obstacles that they were going to have to overcome, and different areas where you're inefficient because you didn't have previous generations didn't have the opportunity. They didn't have to wade through any of that. They just come in on a more level playing field. Still not a level playing field, but a more level playing field, which is not affected by self-inflicted wounds. No, I have some amazing Nigerian friends, and that is so true. I wish there was we need to research this. The number of people that are in our country that are Nigerian, and Kenya's another good example of that. And what is their level of secondary education versus people that have lived here for generations and generations? They're not immigrants, and what is this secondary education level based to those that have been here for forever? There's going to be a huge disparity.
Well, yeah, because most of those people come from those other countries. They come here for the education.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why they come. I've got Jamaican friends, and they all come here on visas that are educational, that are getting them get them the education.
Yeah, and then you get into the their children, and then their children's children. They seem to. I mean, the folks that I have in my life, there is a more receptiveness or pursuing secondary education as well, because it was their reason in the beginning to come in the first place.
Right. Yeah, and there are other things that are in our society, and
Absolutely.
I think that's why it's so important. I think what our politicians do in Washington is important, because there are a lot of things that we can do to change that, change our culture, right? To break the mindset. We can do some things, and that's all we do. What we do. That's all we do. Talk about unity. That's why we've talked about mentorship programs and things like that, because we can actually affect that, and that's the beauty of our democratic republic, our republic that we've got here, is that we can go out there. We don't have to rely on politicians, businesses, or anybody else. As an individual, I can go out there and say, I see that young kid, he needs some help, I'm going to mentor him. I've been telling guys like this, because since we're old now, I've been saying, I've been telling my brother Dwayne, I said, Dwayne, really, what we should be doing is these professional athletes, these making millions of dollars after they come out of college and have not had, in a lot of cases, fathers in their lives and direction in their lives, leadership in their lives. That's what we should be doing at our age now, because we're at the age where we should be grabbing those guys and saying, I understand you got $1 million. Let me tell you what's more valuable than that. Let me tell you what's more important than that.
Yep.
And building that kind of character into the youngsters, so that we don't have this stuff. I mean, because I hear these things about Ezekiel Elliott and all these great people who make all these great athletes and got millions of dollars, and they have all these issues in life. It's like they need leadership, they need guidance. Right?
Absolutely right.
So. But we're back on this race thing. Let's talk about this. Now, this next slide, I want to talk to you about the history so that you have a general context, because I'm really going to educate you on how this came to be. I talked to you before about what happened in 1676, where the quote-unquote whites in charge realized, well, we got to have a problem here. If we don't stratify this thing or create more division, then it's going to be all of them versus us. And so they did that. But so that was 1676. So of course, the first slaves they identify on record arrived in 1619. But let me give you this point that you need to know about, though. Those were not actually the first, quote, Africans in America, all right, and what became America, because actually, both on Columbus's voyage and Ponce de Leon, I think Ponce de Leon was 1500. Of course, Columbus was 14, but 1500s. There, in part of that exploration, he had an African with him. At least they know of one African that was with him, who was just part of the crew. And so think about their attitude towards blacks or Africans. They didn't have a sense of race, you know. No. He was part of the crew working with them as an explorer, right? You know. So we created this terrible thing, of course, and it had been created somewhat in Britain as well. But we created this thing with the transatlantic slave trade and everything like that. So that started in 1619. The first one arrived here. And there were 20 Africans, and they referred to them. And on the manifest, if you look this up historically, it says N-E-G-A-R-S. And people have argued about whether that meant the word that we now use as the N-word, or if that meant that they came from Nigeria or Niger, which is called Niger. So they've argued about what that meant. But one thing that they didn't do was simply say that they're blacks. And so, because there's no thing at this time, we're talking about the 1600s, there's no such thing as black right now. Right. You know, that's going to come later in response to this thing that we talked about called whiteness.
It makes sense that it was a geographical word.
Yes. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so we go to that, and then it's going to be interesting. As you look at that timeline, it's that 18th century, so the 1700s, where stuff really begins to blow up. And if you know your history, which I was a poor student in high school, but I'm learning now, it's all right. But if you know your history, the 1700s was the period of enlightenment. And what is enlightenment about? It's about you got all these great thinkers and you got all these scientists who are coming to the forefront. And people are going, wow, these people are blowing our minds with the stuff that they're saying is true. The problem with a lot of that is all of it wasn't true. That's right. And so we get to the European race scientists in the 18th century and 1700, you've got this German guy, and in this particular graph, you got this French guy. All right, and so we'll talk about that for a second. Go ahead and tell us.
Yeah. So they believed in the degeneration theory, meaning it says of racial origins. They both said that Adam and Eve were Caucasians, and that other races came about by degeneration from environmental factors, such as the sun and a poor diet. They believe that the degeneration could be reversed if proper contemporary forms of man could revert to the original Caucasian race. Blomback defined the Caucasian skull to be the perfect skull compared to all the others.
Yeah, now this is important to understand. This is the 1700s. You got this guy Blumenbach, you got Buffon. This guy, he was from France. This is
wait, I have to stop. His last name really was Buffon.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Maybe that's where they got the word buffoon from.
Yeah, exactly.
His ideas were buffoonish.
I know you want to be all serious, but you look at that first picture. Come on, they can see this as well. That top guy does not look like he is white. I'm just saying.
Well, it's a
graphic.
It's just a painting, I'm sure, of the time.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
We're in the 1700s, man. Don't hold them to their graphics of the 21st century now, because we got graphics, man.
It's the whole concept that these guys that write these things, that the Caucasian skull was the perfect skull and everybody else is a degenerate. It's like the ones that are writing this, the superior ones are the ones that are writing, and everybody else that's the farther away you get from looking like them, the more they are less than.
Well, think about that. I mean, think about that. It's almost like when we think we have something and we know that nobody else knows. When we find out some new knowledge, and this is the Enlightenment. And these guys now, we're smarter than everybody else. We are the enlightened ones, and everybody else, regardless of what they think. Now, remember, we're talking the 1700s. What's happened already in Egypt? Somebody built pyramids. Somebody built pyramids. I don't care how smart you think you are. Somebody, long time ago. So there was some ingenuity. But the Enlightenment, by definition, gave these people the sense of we are now more enlightened. And so that's what's happening here at this time. And so the things that they're saying, Blumenbach came up with this idea. You know, who knows where he got the idea, but his idea was that we could measure intellectual capacity and intellectual ability based on the size of the skull. So he started collecting skulls. and he collected skulls from around the world, and he used that as the premise. Of course, nobody ever validated the premise, and so he said, and he did this thing where he would fill the skulls with buckshot or lead or whatever, and then he would measure it, and those who had the bigger heads, then that meant they were the wiser group, more knowledgeable group, and so his Germans, had the bigger heads. And when you think about, and what's interesting about this whole thing is the way that these European scientists began to go back and forth with American scientists. It's almost like they fed off of each other's ignorance, each other's ridiculous ideas. You got this ridiculous idea. Let me add something to that, and then let me give you something to go back. And they went back and forth. And that's why by the time you get to Adolf Hitler, Hitler was using stuff that he got from the Americans, because those Americans had used stuff they got from the Europeans, and those Europeans, and it just went back and forth, feeding off of each other's craziness.
But if you look at races from actual races from around the world, the Chinese, who have the people from Asian descent, some of the greatest inventions, cultures, architecture come from areas where they have small heads.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So does it even,
oh yeah.
So I mean, there's so many holes in their argument.
Well, they're holes for us now. Back then,
right.
they were the enlightened ones. I mean, and everybody was saying, "Wow!" And so they were convincing a lot of people. It's kind of like I tell people about the internet today. I was like, there are a lot of people now who have access to information, and they look at the internet and they've got that information. But there are a lot of people who don't have access, who don't see the internet. And they're still thinking their way.
You're right.
And so it's all based on information.
Can we talk about motive for a second? So they're creating this theory. Is it just for enlightenment, or is there a motive? Because they're operating from a position of scarcity. Like they're trying to expand and grow across the United States. And in order to do that, in order to achieve the wealth and the innovation that they're trying to, they need people to carry that out. So the whole process, to me, it looks like the dehumanization of the slave trade that's coming into America.
Well,
so
that's
this
the thing.
theory.
Okay.
This theory supports that.
Yeah, this theory and that's what I meant about the fact that we're going to use what you created as a basis for what we want. And it was going back and forth because Germany never had slavery, and they never had slavery, the slavery that we had in America. They never had that.
Right.
And so Johann Blumenbach had no reason to say, I'm going to create this idea that the Caucasian skull is the one to have, is the prime one. And so that way we can then enslave people here in Germany. So he wasn't thinking about that. He did it for the benefit of saying, I'm the super scientist, here's a thought, whatever. And then let's look at the American scientists on the, well, first of all, let's look at that. Then you see the hierarchy, the European scientists. And so they had their own system of hierarchy that they created. And so this is one that Blumenbach did. He had this Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American, which were the indigenous American people. So this is what he did. And
I'm at the top and the bottom of this list.
And here's the thing, in the one that he created, really, he laid out these different groups, and he himself didn't put it in a hierarchy. He said these are the different groups. Okay. However, he also had this idea, the degeneration theory, though, that Caucasian was the prime thing. So he really probably didn't care about the others, and that's where you get the idea of whiteness and all the rest of y'all we don't really care about. So those others really didn't matter to him, and that's why you see the Ethiopian over the American, whatever, because he just had those. It doesn't matter.
So they're
either Caucasian or you're all the other.
They're all fighting for last place.
Yeah, they're all basically, yeah. All right. So, but then when you get to the, you probably can't see that.
I can see it.
Okay, American race scientists. Here's where they took the stuff that, and because you'll see this, and I'm gonna summarize this even before you read it. The Blumenbach was the guy who came up with the skull thing. Well, now you're talking about Samuel Morton. Samuel Morton is now in the late 1700s to 1800. You see where he lived. He was living in the 1799 to 18. So he took that idea and took it to another level. Now he's in America, and now he is using that stuff. So check that out.
So Knott was influenced by the racial theories of Samuel George Morton, and who was one of the inspirators of physical anthropology. Morton collected hundreds of human skulls. That's creepy. Skulls from around the world and tried to classify them. Morton has been among the first to claim that he could judge the intellectual capacity of a race by the cranial capacity measure of the volume of the interior of the skull. A large skull meant a large brain and high intellectual capacity, and a small skull indicated a small brain and decreased intellectual capacity. And by studying these skulls, he came to the conclusion of phylogenism, which is that each race had a separate origin.
All right, so
Serious.
yeah, so here's the thing. Here's what's crazy. That's why when it gets to America, because one thing that Blumenbach and the French guy did over on the other side, they actually believed that we had a common beginning. So that's one thing that was different. But when it gets here to America, these scientists, they've now got a new idea, and it's like, no, we're actually different people. And so think about how that works for the people who are coming into power. Thomas Jefferson, because Thomas Jefferson, though he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal. Thomas Jefferson was then buying into what these American race scientists said, and he actually said that we have reason to believe that the African is inferior in mental capacity. This is what Thomas Jefferson said. The same guy who said all people are created equal. How could he say that? Because these guys said that we had separate beginnings, and so maybe these people aren't in the same line of us as people. So he used that as a basis, which messed him up. So because he got a great principle, which would have worked great for our country, but now you're buying into this craziness that these race scientists create.
The beginning of his theory is flawed, because everybody before him said that we were all created with Adam and Eve, and we all spread across the world from there. And basically, he's throwing that away. It's like all of a sudden, however, whether I don't know, as he said, there was a smart tadpole one day over here, and everybody just all of a sudden popped up on the planet, and from different aliens. Where is he going? None of this makes sense.
Well,
because
think about it.
The beginning of the origin of his theory is flawed.
Right, and it is, and we know that now. But when you're in the social context of the time, and you got, like I said, the Enlightenment happening, and you have these people making these ideas, bringing up these ideas about the origin of the human species. You got Darwin coming in here, the evolution, and so they call this social Darwinism, saying that, well, then because we've evolved, and some of the people have not evolved as much, and then that would give us justification. I can treat you a lot worse if I think that you're not equal to me. If I think you're less than human to me, then I can treat you a lot worse. And so they were picking and choosing. It's like, as a pastor, that's what some of your parishioners do maybe. They pick and choose verses of the Bible to make certain things work for them. This is what they did. They picked and chose so they could create their own story. And so now we're able to inspect that and see if they picked and chose rightfully, and we realized that they didn't. And we realized they had motives.
The thing about these guys, and they're great scientists, have been great scientists in the past. And what makes them continue to be great, stay great, and get even greater is the fact that they have an open mind and open heart about things. If you go look at the beginning writings of Darwin, they're vastly different than the latter writings that have. Many say that he became a believer because there was too many things that he could not explain. Yeah. So, but some of this is just mind-boggling to me that, because we've evolved intellectually, and we see that this stuff is ridiculous.
Okay, and so as we wrap up, and now that you know about race, we've given you some context on how we got here. Some of the race scientists, what they believed, and why we had this different view of certain people groups. So now that you know that, there's that question that we asked at the beginning of the show. And we said that if you knew that it was created for this purpose, to subjugate people, to separate people, to divide people, would you still want it? Do you still want race? And I think that's a question we all have to answer for ourselves. And that ultimately is going to be the determinant of where we go in this country, the United States of America.
Yeah.
So until next time on Talk About Unity, think about that, because we're here trying to erase race. But at the end of the day, more than anything, we want you to join us, and let's talk about unity.
It's all about coming together.
Let's make it happen.